Welcome back to another episode of NFL News on the Boom and Bust channel. I'm your host Terry, and today talking about the hip drop tackle. Couple points of emphasis before we go forward. Number one, I fully acknowledge that I am skating close to the area of not overreacting, but reacting too fast, I would say. This is based on the limited knowledge and information that I have right now. However, there's more that probably could come out to give me better context, but for the sake of wanting to get the conversation going, I am kind of jumping ahead. Number two, this is something we're talking about that's very visual, as most things with football. So without the help of those type of aids, I understand it might be a little more difficult in the audio conversation, but we're going to rock with it and do the best we can. I would definitely suggest watching the videos that are out there from the meeting that demonstrate these tackles if you have not. All right. So first thing that I want to say off top, well, let me first set the stage. So they're having the owners meeting, the annual meeting, whatever. It's owners, coaches have meetings, all type of stuff happen. Obviously in the off season, this is where they propose rules and rule changes and all that. So one of the big conversation pieces outside of the kickoff is the hip drop tackle, which the NFL said in the middle of the season, we're going to ban this thing. And they did just that. So I think the competition committee figuring out how to craft the language and decide what the penalty was going to be. Obviously, that was the main chunk of the work. But as far as approving it, that was going to happen. There was no discussion. I mean, I understand the NFLPA put out a statement, which one of the first times I seen them do that. So shout out to them. One of the, I would say, the worst sports union, but at least they did their job with that. You had a ton of players online trashing it. So it's been vocal, but there was no other outcome other than this being approved, because they were not going to put it up if it wasn't going to be approved. They were not going to vote on something that the vice president or whatever Troy Vincent is saying, we got to get rid of this. There was no way they weren't going to vote it down. So anyway, it is now a penalty and a fine and all that stuff. So that's kind of where we are today. That's why all the reaction. Now, for me, I will 100% admit I was completely against. I was with all of you mostly, probably. I was online talking crap. I was one of those many people. There's a lot of different perspectives. There's people, oh, the game is soft. There's, oh, you keep changing the game so much. There's you keep doing everything for offense and screwing the defense. And that's more the camp that I was in. And so that's just kind of how I felt. The NFL said that this was causing injuries. It caused too many severe injuries. We got to get it out of the game. So I was completely against this. And I will admit, I flipped I wouldn't say hard, but I did a 180 today, a complete 180. After watching the demonstrations and hearing the discussion and hearing I guess from the horse's mouth, because once you hear kind of the rumors and whispers, you do get one thing, but as I said, the nature of this is very important. So once I really got to see what they determine are hip drop tackles, not just what other people and outlets determine, but they showing videos of this, talking about what it is, and really going into it, I understood a lot more, and I honestly agree. So here is the main thing, at least from my perspective. I already felt the NFL is really bad at tackling. And of course, there's some people that are going to say that that's because of the rules and it's worse than it used to be, or some people will say it used to be way worse than it is. So, that's fine. But for me, personally, I just felt that tackling is bad for the most part. I think a lot of people have gotten better, specifically corners. I would say a lot of people in the secondary, specifically corners, have gotten better. And not necessarily in technique, but more so in willingness Technique has gotten better, but I'm telling you, before the spread really took over and the bubble screens, corners were not tackling. Corners weren't even trying to tackle. They were completely giving up the force, which is their position as the last person on the defense, and they just were letting people go. And with all the advent of the bubbles and stuff and these receivers really becoming yak receivers, corners had to learn how to tackle. So I give a lot of respect to a lot of those defensive backs that have gotten better. But at the same time, I feel like some of the safeties, the box safeties and the linebackers have gotten worse. And you get these kind of tackles now where people are like, hey, there's so much space to cover, you just got to get the guy down. And I get that. I mean, football, once they down, the play is over. And so that's the goal. But there is an element still of proper technique. So the reason that this is kind of different for me is because I play rugby and football. And so I know I was coaching right around the time that the heads up tackling became a big thing, which was a result of kind of whoever in the NFL going to work with rugby play. Actually, I think Pete Carroll is one of the people that kicked it off, and the NFL kind of copied it. So it was a big debate, and I still feel like it is today because, again, I play rugby, and I don't know that what the NFL adopted as heads up tackling was exactly what we taught in rugby, but it had some spirit to it. So then some people, well, this ain't rugby and blah, blah, blah. Look, again, my personal perspective is if you can tackle in rugby, you can tackle in football. It is way harder to tackle in rugby. I don't care what people say. Yes, that you can say the people are more athletic in the NFL, and that's fine. But tackling a grown man with no pads and stuff, because we've seen the research, the science is true. There's no doubt about it. As a person that's coached both and played both, when you put the helmet on and stuff, the human being is going to be more reckless. And in rugby, rarely, you do have some, but rarely do you see these people that are completely reckless with their body because you know psychologically you're more vulnerable. And so you have to be able to tackle right or you will get severely injured. And for me, I play, during my time playing as an undergrad, I never got hurt. And I haven't really been hurt in rugby, period. And so obviously there's other people that have been, but for me, to me versus football is night and day. And a lot of people always say, well, I don't have protection, is worse. It's not worse because I think the technique is better. And so anyway, I felt that a lot of people thud tackle. If you're familiar with football, practice, they say, okay, we're thud tempo. We're not fully wrapping up. We're not taking people to the ground. We're just thudding them up. And you see those drills when they had a bag and you wrap it up and you bow your arms up. Again, that's kind of that tackling that some people wanted to take out of the game because you getting your neck compressed in those situations. But either way, I see a lot of that. I see a lot of that tackling, and that's when you get like the judo flips, because when you thud somebody, you stop the momentum. That's the point of it in practice. The momentum gets stopped, plays over. When you actually try and take someone down, thud tackling is not effective. And so when you got to actually take them down, now you got to flip them and do something because your momentum is stopped and their momentum is stopped. So now I got to flip them and do something to take them down. And to me, I always felt like it's not good tackling. A lot of times the tacklers don't make the tackle. If you really watch football today, a lot of times the tackles stop the momentum and wait for everybody to gang up and they blow the whistle. And so I'm like, if you don't really know how to tackle downhill face to face, it's going to be a lot of situations where you could injure someone because you don't know how to properly bring someone down. So I'm watching these hip drop tackles, and honestly, it feels almost like a thud tackle from the back, where a lot of people were just like, how are we supposed to tackle? And again, I felt that way. And some of the clips I saw prior to this that people felt were quote unquote hip drop tackles, I was like, yeah, I don't know what you're supposed to do in that situation. But again, in the ones that the league showed, I'm like, yeah, you very clearly could wrap up their ankles. You could very clearly go for the knees, not like dive at their knees, but wrap up the knees. Like, I don't know if I'm going crazy. I wouldn't say I am because I'm around the lower level football to see that they still teach these things. Like, and that's what I was taught when I was coming up. So I watch these guys and I'm like, you're essentially trying to get a hold of something on the upper body, whether it's a shoulder, part of the back plate, whatever. And you're trying to grip onto that. And some people like kind of jump up and then just let themselves fall backwards. Yeah, that is kind of dangerous. And not only dangerous, that's just not good technique. And so I'm watching these tackles and I'm like, yeah, I mean, and of course people say, well, if I dive and try to wrap up the ankles, I might miss. Or if I try to go for the thighs, the knees, wrap it up from the waist, whatever, it's more likely they might break the tackle. If I grab them, then I know for sure I secure them and they're going to go down. And yes, I get that, but then I would say it's in the spirit of the horse collar tackle because that was the same thing. If I'm running and you're right, or if you're running and I'm right behind you, I can dive and try to wrap you up in a lot of different ways, especially to take the legs out. But with the horse collar, people are like, it's easier to dig my hands into the back of your pads and gain control of you to make sure you go down. It's essentially the same conversation to me. And so, again, there's people that are going to say, oh, well, what are they supposed to do and blah, blah, blah. But again, that's where my perspective is different because I translate it to rugby. If I'm in that situation in rugby, guess what I can't do? I can't grab pads. There are no pads to grab. I can't just grab onto a part of your equipment and try to drag you down. So guess what you do in rugby in those situations? You try to wrap up the legs to stop them. Now, and even then in rugby, I'm like, okay, well, rugby's a little different because the play doesn't stop. It keeps going. But in those situations, I'm not going to try to wrap up your waist. I mean, you can, but that's if that's like a last resort. But again, rugby's a little different because if I could keep you up, we could steal the ball. What I'm going to try to do, and what I usually try to talk to do, is get around the thigh to knee area, and at last resort, get around the ankle area. Like, I'm not going to try to grab part of your upper body and fall backwards. That's not good tackling. And in rugby, that'd be a high tackle more than likely, and it'll be illegal. So, yeah, I look at those tackles. I don't know where they came from because nobody with any proper coaching is teaching anybody that on the lower level. So I'm not sure where it came from. And to be honest, I don't think is a necessary tackle. As far as like a penalty and fine and all that, to me is more about we need to get to better tackling. Now, the league their response has been to fine and penalize. Same thing with leading with the crown of your head and all that stuff. They said our way is, yes, we're going to I believe they had people come out and help coach and teach and the training camps. But the big thing is we're going to fine you. And so this does get wrapped up into a narrative where people, or any number of narratives where people can use this to say, see, it is getting too soft. Or you can say, see, another thing against the defense just to create more offense. And that was me. Just create more offense because you want to sell, you want to get more money, you're greedy. And so on the surface, yes, a lot of people could look at it and say it is part of a lot of narratives, and I understand that. But I do think when you actually look at it, again, from my perspective, I got to agree. I got to agree with this, especially The one part that I forgot, a lot of people are angry about is too vague. It's not specific enough, and that part can be dangerous. From what I understand, and again, this is me with the info I know now, they're leaning on fines more so than flags right now, but they're trying to do something to deter people from tackling this way. And so, I again, not necessarily the route I would go, but hopefully this doesn't become like a big penalty show. And then I see some defenders saying it's about to be a lot of missed tackles. Really, that's on you. You're a bad tackler. I'm gonna be honest with you, because you shouldn't have to tackle that way. And I think even like if you're coming from a side angle of pursuit, I feel like the gator roll is a tackle that makes sense. Like some of these tackles where I'm like, yeah, you're gonna grab them right there, gator roll, whatever, and they don't, and they just kind of jump on their back, and I'm like, yeah, where is that coming from? So I wouldn't say unfortunately, because my thoughts are my thoughts, and it's perfectly fine to have them. But I did do a 180 on this, and I agree that what they're defining as this kind of hip drop tackle, which is essentially jumping up and letting your weight fall down on somebody, or letting your weight fall backwards to pull somebody down. That's not ever what we want to teach people to do. So that's my thoughts on it. Go to the comment section. Let me know what you think. Share around. Get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you for listening.